Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast shorts. There's no co-host on these shorts episodes. These are now around 2 to 4 minute, sometimes as long as 6 to 10 minute observations, ideas, thoughts, or rants about the literature, philosophy, psychology, and even the theology of leadership. Because listening to me talk about leadership for now around 2 to 4 minutes is still better than reading and trying to understand yet another business book. Even that business book your coworker won't stop raving about because it quote-unquote changed their life, but you can't see any difference in their leadership behavior. So how good could that author be? Leadership. All leadership begins with accountability and ownership. And usually the lack of accountability and ownership that people can observe in American society, from our politicians and business leaders all the way to our cultural and social institutions, begins in the home. No one enjoys the implications, of course, of this conclusion, but as with any endemic issue, only clear-eyed analysis of a problem can bring forth a solution to that problem. Accountability and ownership is hard everywhere, and it is hardest in the home. And thus, the other part of the analysis is this. Parenting has always been hard. Being a role model has always been hard. Raising children to be leaders and not followers has always been hard. And many parents have failed at it throughout the long arc of time. But the most spectacular failures of accountability and ownership lie at the feet of men. Single men not taking accountability and ownership of their domains. Married men taking accountability in the workplace and then abdicating such accountability at home. Men with kids, quote unquote, on the side who are telling women one thing and doing another. Throughout history and through all cultures, and even through all cultural collapses and unravelings, it is the men who are responsible for being accountable for the state their homes, families, neighborhoods, and communities are in. This doesn't mean men are the only ones to blame for the state of our current cultural, social, political, and economic leadership, but it does mean that they must be accountable. If you don't like hearing this as a man or as a woman, then the role of leadership is probably not for you. Unfortunately, concluding that the role is not for you doesn't make the role just magically disappear. Nor does the need for the vacuum to be filled just magically disappear. Deciding that the role of leadership is just quote-unquote not for you means that the role of leadership will inevitably be filled by somebody with motivations baser than yours. And maybe you want that because then you have a problem to complain about and talk about and engage with others over in community about rather than engaging with a solution to the problem. Men must be accountable to other men, women, and children first before American society can begin to repair itself. This repair begins in men's homes. It begins by confronting the behavior of other men in the workplace. It means challenging the women in our homes about their behaviors. It means learning how to navigate conflict, negotiation, and confrontation in the home first, and then everywhere else second. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about abusing authority in the home or behaving in an authoritarian fashion bordering on abusive toward women and children. But it does mean humbly acknowledging where men have failed, intentionally readjusting the hierarchy of work, family, and hobbies, and turning away from the sports and the video games and the pornography and the other distractions and turning towards the family and the Bible. Men must demonstrate the grit and courage necessary to recapture ownership and accountability in their homes. The front line of the battle for Western civilization begins with leadership, and leadership begins with ownership and accountability on the part of men first, and then everyone else second. And well, that's it for me. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast today. And now that you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the audio version of this show on all the major podcast players, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, and everywhere else where podcasts are available. There's also a video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the Leadership Toolbox channel on YouTube. Just search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button there on YouTube. And while you're doing that, leave a 5-star review if you like what we're doing here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Just go below the player and hit 5 stars. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to help grow this show. And tell all your friends, of course, in leadership. By the way, if you don't like what we're doing here, well, you can always listen to another leadership show. There are several other good ones out there. At least that's what I've heard. All right. Well, that's it for me.